Hey mamas, welcome to Breastfeeding Relief with Bethany. We share incredible stories, tips, and breastfeeding ideas to help on your journey. I'm your host, Bethany Laverne, a lactation consultant and speech therapist who helps mamas with breastfeeding. Not all breastfeeding stories are the same, and we dive into those topics. Welcome back, mamas, to my podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you. So I've decided to start talking to you guys just one-on-one without other mamas. Specifically today, I want to talk about tongue ties. I don't feel like there's a lot of information out there on tongue ties. And so the true name of a tongue tie is anchoglossia, but we're just going to stick with tongue tie today. So I, as a speech therapist, of course, was taught just a little bit about tongue ties. And as a speech therapist, we talked specifically about everything from the neck up, but I didn't even take a whole course on what is a tongue tie. And so when our son had one, I was like, I think it's a tongue tie, but I'm not 100% sure. So you would be surprised that even as a speech therapist or a few dentists I've talked to, they're like, yeah, we don't learn a lot about tongue ties. And even when I take my boys to the doctor, they've actually had 3 different doctors because we've moved a few times since they were little. Not one of the pediatricians has lifted up their tongue. They always, think about it, they always take a tongue depressor and press the tongue down. Not one of them has lifted it up. And even when I talk to one of them about it, she goes, well, he can stick his tongue out. It's fine. That is not a good judge of if a baby or a child or an adult has a tongue tie, if they can stick their tongue out, or even say, can they lick a popsicle? Again, not a good judge of a tongue tie. So what we're really looking for as professionals should be, can they lift their tongue up? How high does the tongue go? So your tongue should point up, right? It should be able to touch right behind your teeth. But on these kids with tongue ties, they're either tongue tied all the way to the tip of their tongue, like our son was, with a heart-shaped tongue, or it's almost like a U shape. And so the tip of their tongue does not point because it's being pulled back by the fascia, which is basically a fancy word for skin under the tongue on what is connecting their tongue to the base of their mouth is called the fascia. And so when we look at their tongue, there are different degrees of a grading system. And so there, you might hear two different ways of doctors saying it. So you might hear severe, like our son, tied all the way to the tip, a moderate, or a mild. Another one you might hear are different classes, a class 1, 2, 3, or 4. Again, our son had a 4, with the worst being that it was tied to the tip. And so when they lift their tongue up, of course, you're going to see under their tongue that skin, and some is really thin. So our son's was thin. That's easy to diagnose. It's easy to see. Anybody can really see it. The hard ones to diagnose are those really thick ones underneath the tongue. And so that usually is a posterior tongue tie all the way at the back of their mouth. And so a doctor or even a speech therapist, because I work with these kiddos too, specifically with stretching their mouths out. Our fingers need to be in their mouth under their tongue, lifting the tongue up to see what it's like to look at the function of the tongue. And so I'm looking at how high the tongue is going and how well it's going side to side. So specifically with our son, as he got older, he really struggled to feed. And his tongue could not go side to side. So constantly his finger was in his mouth, helping him to move the food around. So it should be in a little ball. We call it a bolus. It should be in a ball and easy to move around your mouth, right? If you think about chewing, it should easily go side to side. Food should not be really getting caught in between your teeth and your cheek. That's called a sulci. And when it does, your tongue goes and fetches it out. It goes and clears it out. But our son couldn't do it. Lots of kids can't do it once they start eating. And so they use their fingers, and their fingers are constantly in their mouth, helping them eat. So Lots of people have told me they just thought tongue tie was just like a phrase, like, oh, you're tongue tied, or the cat's got your tongue, like you just aren't a good speaker, when that's not really the case. It's actually a medical diagnosis, one which my uncle didn't know. And so it can be corrected. And it's so easy, mamas, to go get corrected at your pediatric dentist office or an ENT if you don't have one in your area. Because some of these smaller towns, you guys don't have pediatric dentists that specialize in releasing tongue ties with CO2 lasers. And so you might have to travel a little bit of ways. I know in one town I lived in after we moved, I couldn't find another one in town to refer to. And so I was referring an hour away. And sometimes that's, what we have to do. But I just want to give you a little bit more education on tongue ties and what we're looking for. Thank you so much for listening in. If you loved this episode, it would mean so much if you would share it with another mama or post on social media and tag me. I want to personally thank you for wanting to help other mamas. You got this. I'm rooting for your breastfeeding journey.